In this video, we're going to be looking at the differences between HBO's A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms and the book it is based on, which is called The Hedge Knight, and it is a novella George R.R. Martin released back in 1998. We'll also be using the comic book made by Mike S. Miller, so that way you get to see all three versions. The book written by George, the show made by Ira Parker, and the comic book made by Miller. You can decide for yourself which of the three you think is best as we go through each episode to see how it was adapted. And now, let's begin. The Hedge Knight, A Tale of the Seven Kingdoms. The story offered here takes place about 100 years prior to the events described in A Game of Thrones. The spring rains had softened the ground, so Dunk had no trouble digging the grave. He chose a spot on the western slope of a low hill, for the old man had always loved to watch the sunset. "Another day done," he would sigh, "and who knows what the morrow will bring us, eh, Dunk?" Well, one morrow had brought rains that soaked them to the bones, and the one after had brought wet gusty winds, and the next a chill. By the fourth day, the old man was too weak to ride, and now he was gone. Only a few days past he had been singing as they rode, the old song about going to Gulltown to see a fair maid. But instead of Gulltown, he'd sung of Ashford. "Off to Ashford to see the fair maid, hey ho, hey ho," Dunk thought miserably as he dug. When the hole was deep enough, he lifted the old man's body in his arms and carried him there. He had been a small man and slim, stripped of hauberk, helm, and sword belt. He seemed to weigh no more than a bag of leaves. Dunk was hugely tall for his age, a shambling, shaggy, big-boned boy of 16 or 17 years, no one was quite certain which, who stood closer to 7 feet than to 6, and had only just begun to fill out his frame. The old man had often praised his strength. He had always been generous in his praise. It was all he had to give. He laid him out on the bottom of the grave and stood over him for a time. The smell of rain was in the air again, and he knew he ought to fill the hole before the rain broke. But it was hard to throw down dirt on that tired old face. "There ought to be a septon here, to say some prayers over him, but he only has me." The old man had taught Dunk all he knew of swords and shields and lances, but had never been much good at teaching him words. "I'd leave your sword, but it would rust in the ground," he said at last, apologetic. "The gods will give you a new one, I guess. I wish you didn't die, sir." He paused, uncertain what else needed to be said. He didn't know any prayers, not all the way through. The old man had never been much for praying. "You were a true knight, and never beat me when I didn't deserve it," he finally managed. "Except that one time in Maidenpool. It was the inn boy who ate the widow woman's pie, not me. I told you." "It don't matter now. The gods keep you, sir." He kicked dirt in the hole, then began to fill it methodically, never looking at the thing at the bottom. He had a long life, Dunk thought. He must have been closer to 60 than to 50, and how many men can say that? At least he had lived to see another spring. The sun was westering as he fed the horses. There were 3. His swayback Stot, the old man's palfrey, and Thunder, his warhorse, who was ridden only in tourney and battle. The big brown stallion was not as swift or strong as he had once been, but he still had his bright eye and fierce spirit. And he was more valuable than everything else Dunk owned. "If I sold Thunder and Old Chestnut and the saddles and bridles too, I'd come away with enough silver to..." Dunk frowned. The only life he knew was the life of a hedge knight, riding from keep to keep, taking service with this lord and that lord, fighting in their battles and eating in their holes until the war was done, then moving on. There were tourneys from time to time as well, though less often, and he knew that some hedge knights turned robber during lean winters, though the old man never had. "I could find another hedge knight in need of a squire to tend his animals and clean his mail," he thought, Or might be I could go to some city, to Janisport or King's Landing, to join the city watch. Or else, he had piled the old man's things under an oak. The cloth purse contained 3 silver stags, 19 copper pennies, and a chipped garnet. As with most hedge knights, the greatest part of his worldly wealth had been tied up in his horses and weapons. Dunk now owned a chainmail hauberk that he had scored the rust off 1,000 times, an iron half-helm with a broad nasal and a dent on the left temple, a sword belt of cracked brown leather, and a longsword in a wood and leather scabbard, a dagger, a razor, a whetstone. Greaves and gorget, an 8-foot war lance of turned ash topped by a cruel iron point, and an oaken shield with a scarred metal rim, bearing the sigil of Sir Arlen of Pennytree, a winged chalice, silver on brown. Dunk looked at the shield, scooped up the sword belt, and looked at the shield again. The belt was made for the old man's skinny hips. It would never do for him, no more than the hauberk would. He tied the scabbard to a length of hempen rope, knotted it around his waist, and drew the longsword. The blade was straight and heavy, good castle forged steel. The grip soft leather wrapped over wood, the pommel a smooth polished black stone. Plain as it was, the sword felt good in his hand, and Dunk knew how sharp it was, having worked it with whetstone and oilcloth many a night before they went to sleep. It fits my grip as well as it ever fit his, he thought to himself. And there is a tourney at Ashford Meadow. Sweetfoot had an easier gait than Old Chestnut, but Dunk was still sore and tired when he spied the inner head, a tall darb and timber building beside a stream. The warm yellow light spilling from its windows looked so inviting that he could not pass it by. I have 3 silvers, he told himself, enough for a good meal and as much ale as I care to drink. As he dismounted, a naked boy emerged dripping from the stream and began to dry himself on a rough-spun brown cloak. Are you the stable boy? Dunk asked him. The lad looked to be no more than 8 or 9, a pasty-faced, skinny thing, his bare feet caked in mud up to the ankle. His hair was the queerest thing about him. He had none. I'll want my palfrey rubbed down, and oats for all 3. Can you tend to them? The boy looked at him brazenly. I could, if I wanted. Dunk frowned. I'll have none of that. I am a knight, I'll have you know. You don't look to be a knight. Do all knights look the same? No, but they don't look like you either. Your sword belt's made of rope. So long as it holds my scabbard, it serves. Now see to my horses. You'll get a copper if you do well, and a clout in the ear if you don't. He did not wait to see how the stable boy took that, but turned away and shouldered through the door. At this hour, he would have expected the inn to be crowded, but the common room was almost empty. A young lordling in a fine Damsic mantle was passed out at one table, snoring softly into a pool of spilled wine. Otherwise, there was no one. Dunk looked around uncertainly until a stout, short, whey-faced woman emerged from the kitchens and said, Sit where you like. Is it ale you want, or food? Both. Dunk took a chair by the window, well away from the sleeping man. There's good lamb, roasted with a crust of herbs, and some ducks my son shot down. Which will you have? He had not eaten at an inn in half a year or more. Both, the woman laughed. Well, you're big enough for it. She drew a tankard of ale and brought it to his table. Will you be wanting a room for the night as well? No. Dunk would have liked nothing better than a soft straw mattress and a roof above his head. But he needed to be careful with his coin. The ground would serve. Some food, some ale, and it's on to Ashford for me. How much farther is it? A day's ride. Bear north when the road forks at the burnt mill. Is my boy seeing to your horses, or has he run off again? No, he's there, said Dunk. You seem to have no customers. Half the town's gone to see the tourney. My own would as well, if I allowed it. They'll have this in when I go, but the boy would sooner swagger about with the soldiers, and the girl turns to sighs and giggles every time a knight rides by. I swear I couldn't tell you why. Knights are built the same as other men, and I never knew a joust to change the price of eggs. She eyed Dunk curiously. His sword and shield told her one thing, his rope belt and rough-spun tunic quite another. You're bound for the tourney yourself? He He took a sip of ale before he answered. A nut-brown colour it was, and thick on the tongue, the way he liked it. "Aye," he said, "I mean to be a champion." "Do you now?" the innkeeper answered, polite enough. Across the room, the lordling raised his head from the wine puddle. His face had a sallow, unhealthy cast to it beneath a rat's nest of sandy brown hair, and blonde stubble crusted his chin. He rubbed his mouth, blinked at Dunk, and said, "I dreamed of you." His hand trembled as he pointed a finger. "You stay away from me, do you hear? You stay well away." Dunk stared at him uncertainly. "My lord?" The innkeeper leaned close. "Never you mind that one, sir. All he does is drink and talk about his dreams. I'll see about that food." She bustled off. "Food?" The lordling made the word an obscenity. He staggered to his feet, one hand on the table to keep himself from falling. "I'm going to be sick," he announced. The front of his tunic was crustly red with old wine stains. "I wanted a whore, but there's none to be found here. All gone to Ashford Meadow. Gods be good. I need some wine." He lurched unsteadily from the common room, and Dunk heard him climbing steps, singing under his breath. A sad creature, thought Dunk, but why did he think he knew me? He pondered that for a moment over his ale. The lamb was as good as any he had ever eaten, and the duck was even better, cooked with cherries and lemons, and not near as greasy as most. The innkeeper brought buttered peas as well, and oaten bread still hot from her oven. "This is what it means to be a knight," he told himself as he sucked the last bit of meat off the bone. "Good food and ale whenever I want it, and no one to clout me in the head." He had a second tankard of ale with the meal, a third to wash it down, and a fourth because there was no one to tell him he couldn't. And when he was done, he paid the woman with a silver stag and still got back a fistful of coppers. It was full dark by the time Dunk emerged. His stomach was full and his purse was a little lighter, but he felt good as he walked to the stables. Ahead, he heard a boy whicker. "Easy, lad," a boy's voice said. Dunk quickened his step, frowning. He found the stable boy mounted on Thunder and wearing the old man's armor. The hauberk was longer than he was, and he'd had to tilt the helm back on his bald head or else it would have covered his eyes. He looked utterly intent and utterly absurd. Dunk stopped in the stable door and laughed. The boy looked up, flushed, vaulted to the ground. "My lord, I did not mean—" "Thief!" Dunk said, trying to sound stern. "Take off that armor, and be glad that Thunder didn't kick you in that fool head. He's a warhorse, not a boy's pony." The boy took off the helm and flung it to the straw. "I could ride him as well as you," he said, bold as he pleased. "Close your mouth. I want none of your insolence. The hauberk too. Take it off. What did you think you were doing?" "How can I tell you with my mouth closed?" The boy squirmed out of the chainmail and let it fall. "You can open your mouth to answer," said Dunk. "Now pick up that mail, shake off the dirt, and put it back where you found it. And the half-helm too. Did you feed the horses as I told you, and rub down Sweetfoot?" "Yes," the boy said, as he shook straw from the mail. "You're going to Ashford, aren't you? Take me with you, sir." The innkeep had warned him of this. "And what might your mother say to that?" "My mother?" The boy wrinkled up his face. "My mother's dead. She wouldn't say anything." He was surprised. Wasn't the innkeeper his mother? Perhaps he was only prentice to her. Dunk's head was a little fuzzy from the ale. "Are you an orphan boy?" he asked uncertainly. "Are you?" the boy threw back. "I was once," Dunk admitted, till the old man took me in. "If you took me, I could squire for you." "I have no need of a squire," he said. "Every knight needs a squire," the boy said. "You look as though you need one more than most." Dunk raised a hand threateningly. "And you look as though you need a clout in the ear, it seems to me. Fill me a sack of oats. I'm off to Ashford alone." If the boy was frightened, he hid it well. For a moment he stood there, defiant, his arms crossed, but just as Dunk was about to give up on him, the lad turned and went for the oats. Dunk was relieved. "A pity I couldn't. But he has a good life here at the inn, a better one than he'd have squiring for a hedge knight. Taking him would be no kindness." He could still feel the lad's disappointment, though. As he mounted Sweetfoot and took up Thunder's lead, Dunk decided that a copper penny might cheer him. "Here, lad, for your help." He flipped the coin down at him with a smile. but the stable boy made no attempt to catch it. It fell in the dirt between his bare feet, and there he let it lie. "He'll scoop it up as soon as I am gone," Dunk told himself. He turned the palfrey and rode from the inn, leading the other 2 horses. The trees were bright with moonlight, and the sky was cloudless and speckled with stars. Yet, as he headed down the road, he could feel the stable boy watching his back, sullen and silent. The shadows of the afternoon were growing long when Dunk reined up on the edge of broad Ashford Meadow. 70 pavilions had already risen on the grassy field. Some were small, some large, some square, some round, some of sailcloth, some of linen, some of silk, but all were brightly coloured, with long banners streaming from their centre poles, brighter than a field of wildflowers, with rich reds and sunny yellows, countless shades of green and blue, deep blacks and greys and purples. The old man had ridden with some of these knights. Others Dunk knew from tales told in common rooms and round campfires. Though he had never learned the magic of reading or writing, the old man had been relentless when it came to teaching him heraldry, often drilling him as they rode. The nightingales belonged to Lord Karen of the Marches, as skilled with the high harp as he was with a lance. The ground stag was for Sir Lionel Baratheon. The laughing storm. Dunk picked out the Tarly huntsman, House Dondarrion's purple lightning, the red apple of the Fossaways. There roared the lion of Lannister, cold on crimson, and there the dark green sea turtle of the Ester Mounts swam across a pale green field. The brown tent beneath the red stallion could only belong to Sir Otho Bracken, who was called the Brute of Bracken since slaying Lord Quentin Blackwood 3 years past during a tourney at King's Landing. Dunk heard that Sir Otho struck so hard with the blunted long axe that he stove in the visor of Lord Blackwood's helm and the face beneath it. He saw some Blackwood banners as well, on the west edge of the meadow, as distant from Sir Otho as they could be. Marbrand, Mallister, Cargel, Westerling, Swan, Mundledore, Hightower, Florent, Frey, Penrose, Stokeworth, Daffy, Perrin, Wild. It seemed as though every lordly house of the west and south had sent a knight or 3 to Ashford to see the fair maid and brave the lists in her honour. Yet, however fine their pavilions were to look upon, he knew that there was no place there for him. A threadbare wool cloak would be all the shelter he had tonight. While the lords and great knights dined on capons and suckling pigs, Dunk's supper would be a hard, stringy piece of salt beef. He knew full well that if he made his camp upon that goldy field, he would need to suffer both silent scorn and open mockery. A few perhaps would treat him kindly, yet in a way that was almost worse. A hedge knight must hold tight to his pride. Without it, he was no more than a sellsword. I must earn my place in that company. If I fight well, some lord may take me into his household. I will ride in noble company then, and eat fresh meat every night in a castle hale, and raise my own pavilion at tourneys. But first, I must do well. Reluctantly, he turned his back on the tawny grounds and led his horses into the trees. On the outskirts of the great meadow, a good half-mile from town and castle, he found a place where a bend in a brook had formed a deep pool. Reeds grew thick along its edge, and a tall leafy elm presided over all. The spring grass there was as green as any knight's banners and soft to the touch. It was a pretty spot, and no one had yet laid claim to it. "This will be my pavilion," Dunk told himself. A pavilion roofed with leaves, greener even than the banners of the Tyrells and the Ester Mounts. His horses came first. After they had been tended, he stripped and waded into the pool to wash away the dust of travel. "A true knight is cleanly as well as godly," the old man always said, insisting that they wash themselves hand to heels every time the moon turned, whether they smelled sour or not. Now that he was a knight, Dunk vowed he would do the same. He sat naked under the elm while he dried, enjoying the warmth of the spring air on his skin as he watched a dragonfly move lazily among the reeds. Why would they name it a dragonfly, he wondered. It looks nothing like a dragon. Not that Dunk had ever seen a dragon. The old man had though. Dunk had heard the story 100 times, how Sir Arlen had been just a little boy when his grandfather had taken him to King's Landing, and how they'd seen the last dragon there the year before it died. She'd been a great female, small and stunted, her wings withered. None of her eggs had ever hatched. Some say King Aegon poisoned her, the old man would tell. The third Aegon that would be, not King Darion's father, but the one they named Dragonbane, or Aegon the Unlucky. He was afraid of dragons, for he'd seen his uncle's beast devour his own mother. The summers had been shorter since the last dragon died, and the winters longer and crueler. The air began to cool as the sun dipped below the tops of the trees. When Dunk felt goose flesh prickling his arms, he beat his tunic and breeches against the trunk of the elm to knock off the worst of the dirt, and donned them once again. On the morrow, he could seek out the master of the games and enroll his name. But he had other matters he ought to look into tonight, if he hoped to challenge. He did not need to study his reflection in the water to know he did not look much a knight, so he slung Sir Arlen's shield across his back to display the sigil. Hobbling the horses, Dunk let them crop the thick green grass beneath the elm as he set out on foot for the tawny grounds. In normal times, the meadow served as a commons for the folk of Ashford Town across the river, but now it was transformed. A second town had sprung up overnight, a town of silk instead of stone, larger and fairer than its elder sister. Dozens of merchants had erected their stalls along the edge of the field, selling felts and fruits, belts and boots, hides and hawks, earthenware, gemstones, peterwork, spices, feathers, and all manner of other goods. Jugglers, puppeteers, and magicians wandered among the crowds plying their trades, as did the whores and cut-pursers. Dunk kept a wary hand on his coin. When he caught the smell of sausages sizzling over a smoky fire, his mouth began to water. He bought one with a copper from his pouch and a horn of ale to wash it down. As he ate, he watched a painted wooden knight battle a painted wooden dragon. The puppeteer who worked the dragon was good to watch too. A tall drink of water with the olive skin and black hair of Dawn. She was slim as a lance with no breast to speak of, but Dunk liked her face and the way her fingers made the dragon snap and slither at the end of its strings. He would have tossed the girl a copper if he'd had one to spare, but just now he needed every coin. There were armourers among the merchants, as he had hoped. A Tyroshi with a forked blue beard was selling ornate helms, gorgeous fantastical things wrought in the shapes of birds and beasts and chased with gold and silver. Elsewhere, he found a swordmaker hawking cheap steel blades and another whose work was much finer, but it was not a sword he lacked. The man he needed was all the way down at the end of the row. A shirt of fine chainmail and a pair of lobstered steel gauntlets displayed on the table before him. Dunk inspected them closely. "You do good work," he said. "None better." A stumpy man, the smith was no more than 5 feet tall, yet wide as Dunk about the chest and arms. He had a black beard, huge hands, and no trace of humility. "I need armor for the tourney," Dunk told him. "A suit of good mail, with gorget, greaves, and great helm." The old man's half-helm would fit his head, but he wanted more protection for his face than a nasal bar alone could provide. The armourer looked him up and down. "You're a big one, but I've armoured bigger." He came out from behind the table. "Kneel, I want to measure those shoulders, aye, and that thick neck of yours." Dunk knelt. The armourer laid a length of knotted rawhide along his shoulders, grunted, slipped it about his throat, grunted again. "Lift your arm, no, the right." He grunted a third time. "Now you can stand." The inside of a leg, the thickness of his calf, and the size of his waist elicited further grunts. "I have some pieces in me wagon that might do for you," the man said when he was done. "Nothing prettied up with gold nor silver, mind you. Just good steel, strong and plain. I make helms that look like helms, not winged pigs and queer foreign fruits, but mine will serve you better if you take a lance in the face." "That's all I want," said Dunk. "How much?" 800 stags, for I'm feeling kindly." 800? It was more than he expected. "I could trade you some old armor made for a smaller man, a half-helm, a mail hauberk." "Steely Pate sells his own work," the man declared. "But it might be I could make use of the metal, if it's not too rusted. I'll take it and armor you for 600. Dunk could beseech Pete to give him the armor on trust, but he knew what sort of answer that request would likely get. He had travelled with the old man long enough to learn that merchants were notoriously mistrustful of hedge knights, some of whom were little better than robbers. "I'll give you 2 silvers now and the armor and the rest of the coin on the morrow." The armorer studied him a moment. 2 silvers buy you a day. After that, I sell me work to the next man." Dunk scooped the stags out of his pouch and placed them in the armorer's calloused hand. "You'll get it all. I mean to be a champion here." "Do you?" Pate bit one of the coins. "And these others, I suppose they all came here to cheer you on?" The moon was well up by the time he turned his steps back towards his elm. Behind him, Ashford Meadow was ablaze with torchlight. The sounds of song and laughter drifted across the grass, but his own mood was somber. He could think of only one way to raise the coin for his armor, and if he should be defeated, "One victory is all I need," he muttered aloud. "That's not so much to hope for." Even so, the old man would never have hoped for it. Sir Arlen had not ridden a tilt since the day he had been unhorsed by the Prince of Dragonstone in a tourney at Storm's End many years before. "It is not every man who can boast that he broke 7 lances against the finest knight in the 7 kingdoms," he would say. "I could never hope to do better, so why should I try?" Dunk had suspected that Sir Arlen's age had more to do with it than the Prince of Dragonstone did, but he never dared say as much. The old man had his pride, even at the last. "I am quick and strong." He always said so. What was true for him need not be true for me, he told himself stubbornly. He was moving through a patch of weed, chewing over his chances in his head, when he saw the flicker of firelight through the bushes. Dunk did not stop to think. Suddenly his sword was in his hand and he was crashing through the grass. He burst out roaring and cursing, only to jerk to a sudden halt at the sight of the boy beside the campfire. "You!" He lowered the sword. "What are you doing here?" "Cooking a fish," said the bold boy. "Do you want some?" "I meant, how did you get here? Did you steal a horse?" "With a man who was bringing some lambs to the castle for my lord of Ashford's table." "Well, you best see if he's gone yet, or find another cart. I won't have you here." "You can't make me go," the boy said, impotent. "I had enough of that inn." "I'll have no more insolence from you," Dunk warned. "I should throw you over my horse right now and take you home." "You need to ride all the way to King's Landing," said the boy. "You'd miss the tourney." King's Landing? For a moment, Dunk wondered if he was being mocked. But the boy had no way of knowing that he had been born in King's Landing as well. Another wretch from Fleabottom, like as not, and who can blame him for wanting out of that place? He felt foolish standing there with sword in hand over an 8-year-old orphan. He sheathed it, glowering so the boy would see that he would suffer no nonsense. "I ought to give him a good beating at the least," he thought. But the child looked so pitiful he could not bring himself to hit him. He glanced around the camp. The fire was burning merrily within a neat circle of rocks. The horses had been brushed and clothes were hanging from the elm, drying above the flames. "What are those doing there?" "I washed them," the boy said, "and I groomed the horses, made the fire, and caught this fish. I would have raised your pavilion, but I couldn't find one." "There's my pavilion." Dunk swept a hand above his head, at the branches of the tall elm that loomed above them. "That's a tree," the boy said, unimpressed. "It's all the pavilion a true knight needs. I would sooner sleep under the stars than in some smoky tent." "What if it rains?" "The tree will shelter me." "Trees leak." Dunk laughed. "So they do. Well, if truth be told, I lack the coin for a pavilion, and you'd best turn that fish or it'll be burnt on the bottom and raw on the top." "You'd never make a kitchen, boy." "I would, if I wanted," the boy said. But he turned the fish. "What happened to your hair?" Dunk asked of him. "The maesters shaved it off." Suddenly, self-conscious, the boy pulled up the hood of his dark brown cloak, covering his head. Dunk had heard that they did that sometimes, to treat lice or rootworms or certain sickness. "Are you ill?" "No," said the boy. "What's your name?" "Dunk," he said. The wretched boy laughed aloud, as if that was the funniest thing he'd ever heard. "Dunk," he said. "Sir Dunk, that's no name for a knight. Is it short for Duncan?" The old man called him just Dunk for as long as he could recall, and he did not remember much of his life before. "Duncan, yes," he said. "Sir Duncan of—" Dunk had no other name nor any house. Sir Arlen had found him living wild in the stews and alleys of Flea Bottom. He had never known his father or mother. What was he to say? Sir Duncan of Flea Bottom did not sound very knightly. He could take Pennytree, but what if they asked him where it was? Dunk had never been to Pennytree, nor had the old man talked much about it. He frowned for a moment, and then blurted out, "Sir Duncan the Tall." He was tall, no one could dispute that, and it sounded puissant, though the little sneak did not seem to think so. "I have never heard of any Sir Duncan the Tall." "Do you know every knight in the Seven Kingdoms then?" The boy looked at him boldly. "The good ones? I'm as good as any. After the tourney, they'll all know that. Do you have a name? Thief?" The boy hesitated. "Egg," he said. Dunk did not laugh. "His head does look like an egg. Small boys can be cruel, and grown men as well." "Egg," he said. "I should beat you bloody and send you on your way. But the truth is, I have no pavilion, and I have no squire either. If you'll swear to do as you're told, I'll let you serve me for the tourney. After that, well, we'll see. If I decide you're worth your keep, you'll have clothes on your back and food in your belly. The clothes might be roughs, and the food salt beef and salt fish, and maybe some venison from time to time when there are no foresters about. But you won't go hungry, and I promise not to beat you except when you deserve it." Egg smiled. "Yes, my lord." "Sir," Dunk corrected, "I am only a hedge knight." He wondered if the old man was looking down on him. "I will teach him the art of battle, the same as you taught me, sir. He seems like a likely lad. Might be one day he'll make a knight." The fish was still a little raw on the inside when they ate it, and the boy had not removed all the bones, but it still tasted a world better than hard salt beef. Egg soon fell asleep beside the dying fire. Dunk lay on his back nearby, his big hands behind his head, gazing up at the night sky. He could hear distant music from the tawny grounds, half a mile away. The stars were everywhere, thousands and thousands of them. One fell as he was watching, a bright green streak that flashed across the black and then was gone. A falling star brings luck to him who sees it, Dunk thought. But the rest of them are all in their pavilions by now, staring up at the silk instead of sky. So the luck is mine alone. Okay, so the episode just aired, and I think it was really good. So I think they did a good adaptation of following the books, but also having to make changes because obviously books just have so much more details than you would get on screen. Probably the biggest change would be Dunk externalizing all of his thoughts. Now, obviously, they've done this in Game of Thrones with other characters where they either talk to it about someone or they just say it out loud. Dunk did a lot of this. He pretty much mainly talked to other people, or in this episode also his horse, but I think it worked pretty well. There was probably only one thought that probably wasn't the greatest, and that's when he was asked, "Who do you want to challenge?" He said the normal response of, "I don't mind who," and then the other person was like, "Oh, but that's what you have to say." And then in his thought, he said, "Yes, it makes all the difference in the world." But then he actually said that out loud, which he probably shouldn't have said to that squire. But anyway, apart from that, I think all the other external monologues was really good. Now, some of the other changes. So another change they did was the puppet show, which no longer really was like a puppet show. It was more like a small theatric play, which looked great on screen. But I do think it kind of takes away from the story, especially where these were just amateur puppeteers, and the girl that Dunk liked just happened to be one of the puppeteers, and I don't think even the main attraction, where I feel like in this show, she was the one, narrating, she was the one, telling the story, and it's just a bit different from what I kind of expected in the book, or, read from the book. I'm probably saying her name wrong, it's Tencel, but she seemed to be like the main star of this show, where I do think in the book she was just one of the people with a puppet. But we'll see how it goes. I'm sure they'll do a great change with it anyway. Now, obviously, throughout the entire episode, they added so much humor. Like, even in the beginning where Dunk's behind the tree taking a shit, like completely not, probably does happen in the books, but were not mentioned in the books. Although it is interesting that Robin is right there when he's doing the shit, which is like also the same thing he said. That was his only witness about when getting knighted with Sir Arlen. So, bit interesting there, I think. I think they did quite well putting that little detail in it. So yeah, they've added so much humor throughout the episode, like even with the completely added scene with Lionel Baratheon where him and Dunk get drunk together and talk about random stuff and dance and whatever it is they were doing that episode. But I do think that was a great added scene, but obviously they had to get up to the runtime. They pretty much ended the episode where we thought it was going to be, with Dunk and Egg watching the stars. They added Egg a little bit later in the story than other bits that take place, because even when Dunk introduces himself, he really does have Sir Duncan the Tall in his mind a lot, and that's because Egg helps him get there by giving him the suggestion of Duncan, and then he makes up the tall part. Even though actually it is kind of funny where in this version, the reason he has the tall part is because Lionel Baratheon completely says, oh, you are tall, be proud, don't crouch over, which is pretty funny, and it does make sense for why he uses the word tall randomly, even though he is tall. No, it was a good added scene. It was just not exactly what I was expecting. But yeah, apart from that, they've obviously probably cut some characters, condensed some things together, not included all the dialogue that goes through, especially when Dunk is the one that has narrated thoughts. Like, he can't say everything in his head because some things he said are just like, even he knows would be too inappropriate to say out loud. I think they did a really good job with this episode, and I'm really excited for another kind of Game of Thrones spin-off, which, if you saw our short recently, they're actually thinking of doing another Arya Stark, sequel to Game of Thrones, which would be really good, but we'll see what happens. Obviously, they stopped the Jon Snow idea as well, so it might not happen, but who knows. But also with that, did you hear that George has had a falling out with the House of the Dragon showrunner? But yeah, apart from that, if you do actually want to see what happens from House of the Dragon up to A Tale of a Dunk and Egg, or The Hedge Knight, that is this episode, we have a 30-minute animated comic book, which is just about to be played, which there are no spoilers for, but I do think it'll help you understand where the story's at, especially after House of the Dragon. Otherwise, this was a great episode, looking really forward to the next ones, and thanks for watching. In this video, we'll explore what happened to the Targaryen dynasty after House of the Dragon and up to A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, without revealing any spoilers for either show. We'll cover which kings ruled during that time and the major events that shaped their reigns. On the left side of the screen, you'll see artwork that helps illustrate what's happening, while on the right, we'll show vertical clips to match the story. Anyway, let's get started. Targaryen history, 133 to 209 AC. Aegon III, the Dragonbane, 133 to 157 AC. Winter Fever, 133 AC. When plague swept through Westeros, young Aegon III, only 13 years of age, showed surprising courage and compassion for a king. He visited the sick, sat silently at their bedsides, and comforted them with quiet presence. Survivors spoke of his healing hands. Regency control, 133 AC. However, Aegon III's hand, Unwin Peak of Starpike, the seat of House Peak in the Reach, undid all his appointments and filled the court with his allies. Aegon later retreated into sullen silence, signing whatever papers were put before him, while others ruled in his name for much of his youth. Queen Jaehaerys's death and remarriage, 133 AC. Jaehaera, Aegon's first wife, either leapt or was pushed from Maegar's holdfast. Rumors swirled that Peak had a hand in it to free the king for remarriage, ideally to Peak's daughter. However, Aegon chose his second queen at the famous Maiden Day Ball, selecting Daena Valyrion, a 6-year-old child. His attitude improved and he started attending more small council meetings until Peak essentially belittled him to the point of not attending anymore. Return of Viserys II, 134 AC. Lord Alan Valerion returned to King's Landing from his great voyage and brought back Aegon's younger brother, Viserys, previously suspected to be dead. Pieck, not happy with the ransom paid for Viserys, resigned and was replaced by Lord Thaddeus Rowan of House Rowan in the Reach. At this time, the Reach emerged as the most stable and least devastated of the great regions, making its wealthy and well-connected lords the natural choice to dominate Aegon III's regency and serve him as hands. Viserys' return lifted Aegon's spirits and gave him a companion. However, he neglected Daenerys as his friend, Gaiman Palehair. Dragon Eggs, 135 AC. Viserys II, who had returned a year earlier with his wife Lara Rhaegar, gave birth to Aegon IV. Viserys presented Aegon IV with a dragon egg, but when Aegon III learned his niece, Laena Valerion's dragon egg, hatched into a monstrosity, he ordered all dragon eggs removed from the Red Keep, which led to friction with his brother. As Aegon III spent more time with Daenerys and Gaemon as a result, Gaemon would lose his life during a dinner after being poisoned. The poisoned was determined as Tears of Lys, baked in the apple tarts. Daenerys was also poisoned, but would survive, while Aegon wasn't poisoned as he never ate sweets. Although Aegon and Viserys made up, Gaemon's death left Aegon inconsolable, and once again he lost interest in the crown. The Secret Siege of Maegor's Holdfast, 135 to 136 AC. The fall of House Rhaegar in Lys and the bankruptcy of their bank coincided with the Rhaegars in Westeros being arrested on suspicion of poisoning Gaemon. Thaddeus Rowan was arrested and Kingsguard Marston Waters was named new Hand of the King. To protect Viserys' wife, Lara, Aegon and Viserys barricaded themselves in Maegor's Holdfast for 18 days. On the 12th day, the besiegers brought forth Thaddeus Rowan in chains, with his face so swollen that he was unrecognizable. With a slurred voice, Rowan confessed to plotting with the Rhaegars to poison both King Aegon and Queen Daenerys to replace them with Prince Viserys and his wife, Lara Rhaegar. Aegon declared that Lord Rowan had been tortured by traitors into falsely confessing, and demanded of Sir Marston Waters to seize the Lord Confessor if you love your king, else I will know that you are as false as he is. According to Archmaester Gildain, Aegon, 15 at the time, seemed every inch a king in that moment. Aegon restored Lord Thaddeus Rowan to the office as Hand of the King. Subsequently, he was dismissed. At the Gathering of Lords in 136 AC, Lord Torrhen Manderley was chosen as the new Hand. Personal rule from 136 AC. On his 16th name day, Aegon dismissed his regents and ruled himself. Lord Torrhen Manderley was greatly affronted by the brusque manner of his dismissal, and according to Archmaester Gildain, this act made Manderley Aegon's enemy. Aegon was regarded as a broken king who ruled over a broken reign. Aegon was melancholic to the end of his days, found pleasure in almost nothing, and locked himself in his room to brood for days on end. It took 10 years until Aegon consummated his marriage when his wife was 16. But eventually, Queen Daenerys Velaryon birthed Aegon 5 children: Daeron, born in 143 AC, and Baelor, born in 144 AC. Daena, born in 145 AC, Rhaena, born in 147 AC, and Elena, born in 150 AC. Following his birth, Prince Daeron was named Prince of Dragonstone by Aegon. Viserys later became his hand, and together they dealt with pretenders claiming to be Prince Daeron Targaryen, brother to the late King Aegon II Targaryen. Death of the Last Dragon, 153 AC. The Last Dragon, a female named Dragonbane, died with rumors that Aegon poisoned her. He later became known as Aegon the Dragonbane, with several eggs left behind. However, Aegon was convinced that dragons could be used against those who sought to oppose him. At the urging of Viserys, Aegon brought 9 mages from Essos to attempt to hatch a clutch of dragon eggs with magic, but this ended in failure. When the last dragon died, House Targaryen's most powerful weapon vanished. As generations passed, dragons became little more than myth and song, which is why, by the time of Daenerys Targaryen in Game of Thrones, many in Westeros doubted such creatures had ever truly existed, let alone returned. Viserys' son, Aegon IV, married his sister, Princess Nerys Targaryen, with Aegon III's blessing. However, from a young age, Aegon IV indulged himself with women and continued to do so after his marriage. Prince Aemon the Dragon Knight, their younger brother, quarreled with Aegon at the wedding feast after defending Nerys' dignity. Aemon later joined the Kingsguard, taking his vows at the age of 17, and eventually became Lord Commander. Aegon IV and Nerys' first child, Prince Daeron II, was born late in 153 AC, but Aegon was warned that a second pregnancy could kill his wife. After giving Aegon an heir, Nerys begged him, "Let us live henceforth as brother and sister." Aegon refused, saying, "That is what we are doing," and insisted she still perform her wifely duties for the rest of her life. Aegon III's death, 157 AC. Aegon died of consumption in 157 AC at 36 years of age. His legacy was that of being remembered as old and broken beyond his years. He was not remembered fondly. Daeron was crowned King Daeron I in 157 AC at the age of 14. Daeron kept his uncle, Prince Viserys, as Hand of the King, as his uncle had held the position for Aegon III as well. Viserys did not insist upon a regency for the young king. Unlike his father, Daeron was bold, ambitious, and determined to win glory. Conquest of Dorne, 157 to 161 AC. One of King Daeron's ambitions was to bring Dorne into the fold and do what his ancestor Targaryens were unable to. Viserys and other councillors objected to the young king's plans, reminding Daeron that Aegon the Conqueror and his sisters had failed twice in trying to conquer Dorne with dragons, and that the Iron Throne now had none. Daeron famously replied, "You have a dragon. He stands before you." King Daeron launched a full invasion of Dorne with the aid of Lord Alan Valyrion, succeeding in just a year. After several battles, the Prince of Dorne and 200 Dornish lords bent the knee in submission of Sunspear in 158 AC. Daeron became the first Targaryen king to conquer Dorne and unite all 7 kingdoms for the first time, despite the loss of 10,000 men in taking the peninsula. Daeron wrote The Conquest of Dorne about his achievement, but exaggerated the numbers of his foes to make his conquest seem greater. Daeron's cousin and Viserys' son, Aegon IV, was tasked with escorting high-born Dornish hostages to King's Landing. He later began an affair with Lady Cassella Vaith, one of the hostages, making her one of his first known mistresses. In 160 AC, Daeron's brother, Baelor, married his sister, Princess Dana, when he was 16 and she was 15. Following the submission of Sunspear, the young dragon leaves Lord Lionel Tyrell to govern Dorne. After Daeron returns to King's Landing, the Dornishmen kill Lionel in an uprising against the Iron Throne. The young dragon's death, 161 AC. When Daeron returns to Dorne with a fresh army, he is killed at the age of 18 by Dornish plotters while meeting under a peace banner, and his cousin, Prince Aemon the Dragon Knight, is captured. Daeron is said to have lost 10,000 men conquering Dorne and 50,000 while failing to hold it. While he conquered Dorne without dragons, he likely needed dragons to keep Dorne. Baelor I, the Blessed, 161 to 171 AC. Accession, 161 AC. After Daeron's death, his brother Baelor took the throne at the age of 17. A deeply religious man, Baelor's first act was to pardon the Dornish hostages in King's Landing and publicly forgive his brother's killers despite outcry from his lords and council. Many similar acts of piety and forgiveness occurred throughout his 10-year reign. When his cousin, Princess Nerys, lost newborn twins in 161 AC, Baelor fasted for a moon's turn and sent her husband, Prince Aegon IV, on a diplomatic mission to Braavos, widely seen as an excuse to keep Aegon from his wife. Journey to Dawn and the Miracles, 162 AC. Seeking to bind up the wounds of his brother's war, Baelor personally chose to return the Dornish hostages to Dorne. The king walked the Boneway barefoot and clad in sackcloth, while the hostages rode horses. During the journey, Baelor came upon House Will of the Boneway, where his cousin, Prince Aemon the Dragon Knight of the Kingsguard, was imprisoned naked in a cage. Baelor pleaded for his release, but Lord Will refused. Offering a prayer and a promise to return, Baelor continued his pilgrimage. Baelor arrived at Sunspear, a journey many considered the first miracle of his reign. There, he forged peace with the Prince of Dawn, the second miracle, agreeing that his young cousin, Prince Daeron II, the only grandson of his uncle and hand, Prince Viserys, would one day marry the prince's daughter, Princess Mirria Martell, when both came of age. At Baelor's request, the Prince of Dawn commanded Lord Will to free Prince Aemon from his cage. When Baelor returned to Will's castle, he found that Aemon's torment had worsened as his cage now hung above a pit of vipers. Lord Will mockingly gave Baelor the key to the cage, refusing to release the prince himself. Aemon begged Baelor to flee and seek help, but Baelor, trusting in the god's protection, stepped into the pit. Singers would later claim that serpents bowed before him, but the truth is Baelor was bitten multiple times, from 6 to 50 according to differing accounts. Despite his agony, he reached the cage and freed Aemon, who then leapt from the cage, pulling Baelor with him. Aemon carried the unconscious king for miles until reaching a sept in a mountain village, where they were given a donkey and aid. From there, Aemon brought Baelor to Blackhaven, where House Dondarrion's maester treated him before sending him on to Storm's End. Baelor briefly regained consciousness on the road, but spoke only prayers. It took over 6 months before he recovered enough to return to King's Landing. In his absence, Prince Viserys ruled as Hand, upholding Baelor's peace with Dawn. Return to King's Landing and radical reforms, 163 to 165 AC. The realm rejoiced when Baelor returned and resumed his rule. However, Baelor sought the High Septon's approval to annul his unconsummated marriage to his sister, Princess Dana, believing his vows before his kingship were invalid in the eyes of the Seven. Baelor then confined his 3 sisters, Dana, Rhaena, and Alina, within the Red Keep, creating what he called the Count of Beauty, later known as the Maiden Vault. He claimed this was to preserve their purity and protect men from lust, though many whispered that Baelor feared his own temptations. Even his hand, Prince Viserys, protested to no avail. The 11-year-old Elena even cut her hair and sent it to him, begging for freedom, but Baelor ignored her pleas. Baelor next outlawed prostitution, expelling over 1,000 Oars and their children from King's Landing. He also began construction of the Great Sept on Visenia's Hill, claiming the vision came to him in a dream. What would later be known as the Great Sept of Baelor would not be completed until after his death. During this time, Baelor took Septon's vows to ensure he would never remarry, granting the faith ever greater influence over his rule. Charity and Madness, 166 to 170 AC. The small folk adored Baelor for his generosity. He emptied the royal treasury to feed the poor, famously providing a loaf of bread to every man and woman in the city for a year. However, his royal decrees worried nobles. He burnt thousands of books, replaced messenger ravens with doves, and attempted to grant tax exemptions to lords who locked their daughters in chastity belts. When the High Septon died, Baylor claimed the Seven had revealed his successor, Pate, a humble stonemason. Pate was illiterate and prayerless. He died of a fever within a year. He was rumored to have been poisoned by Viserys II to spare the realm further embarrassment. Baylor then elevated an 8-year-old street boy as the next High Septon, claiming to have seen the child perform miracles. In 170 AC, Prince Daeron, second cousin of Baylor I, and Princess Miriam Martell of Dorne have their first son, Prince Baelor Breakspear Targaryen. They later live in Dragonstone. Later that year, Princess Daena Targaryen gives birth to Daemon Waters, her bastard son by Aegon IV Targaryen, who would later become known as Daemon I Blackfyre, one of the Great Bastards. Aegon IV had helped Daena escape confinement on one occasion, and in time, they had sexual relations. Baelor's death and succession, 171 AC. Princess Daena refused to name Daemon's father, who later confirmed to be Aegon IV. Distraught, Baelor began a 40-day fast to purge what he called the realm's sins. On the 41st day of his fast in 171 AC, Baelor collapsed. Most believed Baelor starved himself to death, though some claimed he was poisoned by his uncle and hand Viserys, either to seize power or to save Westeros from Baelor's growing fanaticism. Baelor starving himself was referenced by Tywin Lannister during his conversation with Tommen Baratheon. After Baelor's death, his sisters were freed from the Maiden Vault. With Baelor having no heirs, some small folk supported Princess Daena's claim as the late king's elder surviving child, but the realm refused another ruling queen. Though gentle and devout, Baelor's reign left the realm weak and overly dominated by the faith. Viserys II, 171 to 172 AC. Accession, 171 AC. Viserys ascended the Iron Throne at age 49 following the death of his nephew, Baelor I the Blessed. Daena's defiant reputation and her recent birth of a bastard son, Daemon Waters, further weakened her claim. Reign, 171 to 172 AC. Viserys only ruled for just over a year, but proved capable and reform-minded given his experience as Hand of the King. He reorganized the royal household and its finances. He also established a new royal mint and worked to expand trade across the Narrow Sea. Viserys' son, Aegon IV, and his sister-wife, Naerys, gave birth to a daughter, Princess Daenerys, though her twin brother was stillborn. However, Aegon IV would also give birth to his second great bastard, Aegor Rivers, Bittersteel, by his fifth mistress, Lady Barbara Bracken. Aegon IV's son, Daeron, gives birth to his second son, Aerys Targaryen, born 172 AC. Death, 172 AC. Viserys died suddenly in 172 AC, reportedly from illness, though some historians suspect he was poisoned by his son, Aegon IV. Remembered without affection by most Westerosi, as he was accursed by some of poisoning Baelor to seize the crown and accomplishing little afterward. However, many acknowledge that his years as Hand of the King had long preserved stability in the realm. Aegon IV, the Unworthy, 172 to 184 AC. Accession and early reign. 172 to 174 AC. Aegon IV became king at age 37 in 172 AC. Initially vigorous, he quickly sank into corruption and indulgence. Aegon IV kept Aemon as Lord Commander of the Kingsguard, though he resented his brother's popularity. His court became infamous for luxury, lust, and favoritism. Lords gained and lost power by amusing or pleasing him. Began his long line of mistresses and bastards, acknowledging multiple illegitimate children across Westeros. His cruelty toward Nerys and his open infidelities became notorious. Around 174 AC, Sir Morgul Hatswick accused Nerys of adultery and treason, prompting her brother, Prince Aemon the Dragon Knight, to defend her honor in trial by combat. Aemon slew Sir Morgul Hatswick, vindicating the queen and earning eternal fame, but also Aegon's jealousy hatred. In the aftermath, rumors spread that Aemon was the true father of Prince Daeron. According to Maester Caith's Lives of Four Kings, Aegon himself secretly fueled these rumors to undermine his son's legitimacy. The timing was no coincidence. Aegon and his son, Prince Daeron II, were feuding over the king's plan for an unprovoked invasion of Dorne, which Daeron opposed. Casting doubt on Daeron's birth would have given Aegon reason to disinherit him in favor of his beloved bastard, Daemon Blackfyre. Ignoring all counsel, Aegon pressed ahead with his campaign. His invasion fleet set sail in 174 AC and was destroyed by storms, a costly humiliation. In the following years, Aegon's spite and vanity deepened. He renamed the disputed hills between houses Bracken and Blackwood, first as Barber Teats after Mistress Barbara Bracken, then as Mrs. Teats after Melissa Blackwood, depending on his current favourite. Daeron II gives birth to his third son, Rhaegal Targaryen, born 174 AC. Bloodraven is born 175 AC. Brynden Rivers, otherwise known as Bloodraven, was born in King's Landing as the bastard son of King Aegon IV and his sixth mistress, Lady Melissa Blackwood. Tawny's humiliation and Aemon's valor, 177 to 178 AC. When Aegon IV forbade Aemon from entering a tourney, as he intended to crown his mistress Queen of Love and Beauty, Aemon entered disguised as the Knight of Tears, won and crowned Queen Nerys instead, shaming Aegon before all of King's Landing. Aegon IV's son, Daeron II, gives birth to his fourth and final son, Maekar Targaryen, born 177 AC, who would later end up being father to Aegon V the Unlikely. In 178 AC, Aegon IV discovered Sir Terence Toyne of the Kingsguard in bed with his mistress Lady Bethany Bracken. He had both brutally executed and killed Lord Bracken, her father, out of spite. Seeking revenge, the Toyne brothers launched an assassination attempt on the king. Prince Aemon died protecting Aegon, taking the fatal blows meant for his brother, an act of valor that immortalized him as one of Westeros's greatest knights. Maester Aemon Targaryen in Game of Thrones was notably named after Prince Aemon. Loss of Nerys and deepening cruelty, 179 to 182 AC. Queen Nerys died in childbirth in 179 AC along with her infant child. Aegon showed no grief, instead seizing the chance to defame Aemon's memory, openly suggesting that Prince Daeron was the Dragon Knight's bastard. His slander failed. Aemon was hailed as a chivalric legend, his name sung alongside the heroes of the Age of Heroes, while Aegon's reputation decayed into infamy. Blackfyre and the Seeds of Rebellion, 182 AC. Aegon knighted Daemon Waters at age 12 and gifted him Blackfyre, the Valyrian steel sword of Aegon the Conqueror, the ultimate symbol of royal legitimacy. This act was seen as a deliberate insult to Prince Daeron and hinted that Aegon might name Daemon his heir. Aegon betrothed Daemon to Roanne of Tyrosh, daughter of the Archon, seeking alliance with Tyroshi fleets for another campaign against Dorne. Later, Blackfyre loyalists claimed Aegon had promised Daemon the right to take multiple wives, mirroring Aegon the Conqueror's example, a claim that would later fuel the Blackfire Rebellion. Decadence and decline, 180 to 184 AC. By early 180s AC, Aegon had grown grotesquely obese, his body ulcered and crawling with rot. Too heavy to stand, he was carried through the court on a litter. He ordered the pyromancers to build me dragons, commanding them to construct wildfire-spewing mechanical beasts. Hundreds died, and a quarter of the Kingswood was burnt. By 184 AC, Aegon's cruelty and filth disgusted even his servants. He died that year, aged 49, bloated and half-rotted, a death so vile that Septons called it divine judgment. On his deathbed, Aegon legitimized all his bastards, sowing the seeds of generation of Blackfire rebellions that would purge the realm for the next century. Aegon IV was remembered as Aegon the Unworthy, one of the worst kings in Westerosi history. By the end of his life, he claimed to have slept with at least 900 women, the exact number he could not remember. However, out of all those women, Aegon claims to have only ever truly loved 9. His wife, Naerys Targaryen, is not counted among them. Daeron II, the Good, 184 to 209 AC. Accession and Restoration, 184 to 185 AC. Upon learning of his father, Aegon IV's death in 184 AC, Prince Daeron departs Dragonstone for King's Landing and claimed the Iron Throne without delay. Aware of lingering doubts about his parentage, Daeron crowned himself with Aegon IV's own crown to assert his legitimacy. Determined to heal the realm after his father's corruption, Daeron replaced the small council with capable, honest men and began repairing institutions hollowed by Aegon's misrule. It took a full year to reform the City Watch, which had been as corrupt as Aegon's court. Reconciliation and Reform, 185 to 187 AC. Daeron could not reverse his father's legitimization of the Great Bastards, but he treated them with fairness and honor, continuing their royal incomes and extending trust rather than vengeance. He fulfilled Aegon's unpaid dowry to the Archon of Tyrosh for Daemon Blackfire's marriage to Roanne of Tyrosh, and even granted Daemon lands near the Blackwater Rush to build a keep. His just treatment of Daemon earned respect, though many saw danger in allowing a charismatic bastard to grow too powerful. Daeron's own marriage to Princess Myria Martell of Dorne was happy and fruitful, symbolizing his commitment to peace. The Red Keep during his reign was filled with Tyrosh lords and ladies, giving it a foreign flair that delighted some and alienated others, especially among the Marcher lords and Reachmen who still hated Dorne. Union with Dorne, 187 to 189 AC. Daeron began negotiations with his good brother, Prince Maron Martell of Dorne, to formally unite the realm. After 2 years of diplomacy, an agreement was reached in 188 AC. Maron married Daeron's sister, Princess Daenerys, sealing the alliance. In 189 AC, the Prince of Dorne swore fealty before the Iron Throne, formally bringing Dorne into the Seven Kingdoms. This was the first true peace between Dorne and the Iron Throne, and remained so going into a Game of Thrones. At the Great Sept of Baelor, Daeron and Maron placed a golden wreath before the statue of Baelor the Blessed, declaring, "Baelor, your work is done." To celebrate this bloodless unification, Daeron founded Summerhall, a lightly fortified royal palace in the Dornish Marches, symbolizing peace between Dorne and the Iron Throne. However, the special privileges granted to House Martell, including keeping the title Prince and collecting taxes with minimal royal oversight, stirred resentment among other great houses. The First Blackfire Rebellion, 195 to 196 AC. By 195 AC, rebellion broke out after years of festering discontent. The Marcher Lord and anti-Dornish factions despised Darion's Dornish ties and found their champion in Daemon Blackfire, the eldest and most formidable of the Great Bastards. Daemon's half-brother, Aegor Rivers Bittersteel, urged him to act, exploiting the old rumors of Darion's illegitimacy to rally support. The war split the realm, the Black Dragon of Daemon against the Red Dragon of Daeron. Battles raged across the Riverlands, Reach, Vale, and Westerlands. Daeron's loyalist forces were bolstered by another great bastard, Brynden Rivers, otherwise known as Bloodraven. Brynden remained loyal to his true-born half-brother, King Daeron II, instead of joining his bastard-born half-brother, Daemon. Brynden commanded his private guards, a group of longbowmen called the Raven's Teeth. The war ended in 196 AC at the Battle of the Red Grass Field, where Daemon Blackfire and his two eldest sons, Aegon and Aemon, were slain by the Raven's Teeth. The arrows are said to have been driven by Brynden's sorcery, and people later named Brynden a kinslayer. Daemon's death led the rebels to rout, but some were rallied by Aegor Rivers in a mad charge. The resulting duel between the rival half-brothers left Brynden blinded in one eye and Aegor retreating. Bittersteel escaped across the narrow sea, with Daemon's surviving sons vowing vengeance. The Blackfire pretenders would plague the realm for 5 generations. Daeron II's son, Baelor, would be named Hand of the King in 196 AC. Later reign and legacy, 197 to 208 AC. After the rebellion, Daeron confiscated lands and hostages from rebel lords, but ruled with measured mercy, restoring peace to a battered kingdom. The rest of his reign was largely peaceful and prosperous, marked by learning, tolerance, and stable governance. His first son, Baelor Breakspear, served ably as Hand, proving brave, fair, and beloved as many believed he would surpass his father as king. Baelor and Maekar became renowned fighters. Death and Succession, 209 AC. Thanks for watching, but before you go, our book The Queen Games is coming soon. Pre-orders are open right now, and they directly support the future of the series. We've also dropped a cinematic trailer. The link is below if you want to first look at the world, the cultures, and the queens who fight to rule. And this part is important. You decide what happens next. There's a voting page linked below where you can influence the direction of all future books, alliances, betrayals, and all major decisions. Check out the links in the description, and remember to subscribe for more.